Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm here today with Frazer Grudgings, who's a senior consultant here at URM. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider. So Fraser's today going to be sharing sort of 10 of his top tips for keeping information secure when working from home, which I know is becoming increasingly relevant for so many of us, especially over the last few years. So Fraser, your first tip is keep assets out of sight. So could you explain that one for me, please?
Yeah, sure. So it's fairly simple, sort of common sense related, but if you're traveling from the office back to home, or it may be a customer site or a meeting that you've been to, rather than keep your device on the seat next to you or on the back seat, put it in the boot so it's out of sight. And then also, where possible, when you're at home, if you work at a table that's in front of a window, that people pass by can see, at the end of the day, or if you're not, working on your device, it's just remove it, perhaps pop it in its bag and pop it in a cupboard somewhere so that it's not obvious that, there's a potential device there that may cause somebody to take it if without the permission in that respect. And it's just sort of limiting that risk. Yeah. Out of sight means it's more secure in that respect. And it also gives you the ability to protect your information that you might have on that machine. You may also have some hard copy information in the bag that the device is carried with. That's also confidential, so it's something that you bear in mind. You don't want that on site also.
So I think this next one ties into tip number one, but you've got for tip two here is clear screen. So could you explain what that one means, please?
Yeah, so majority of organizations will have what's called a clear desk or clear screen policy, particularly if they're ISO 27001 certified, or if they've got an information security management system. You'd find that it's a policy that's communicated to everybody in terms of when you're not at your device, if you're away from your desk, that you'd lock the device, control alt delete, so that what's on your screen, is protected. And the advice here is that you carry that good practice into your home environment or the remote working environment. What you're essentially trying to do is protect your confidential information. Now, you might have visitors or family members at home, and if they can't see that information, then there's no risk of them seeing something that they shouldn't see, or perhaps divulging something to somebody else, quite naturally. I'm not thinking they're doing anything wrong, but they may pass on information that is confidential to your work. So it's carrying that best practice using the control alt delete. What you may find is, if you're using a device that's issued to you from a company, part of its default configuration, there may be a timer to lock the screen once you're away. So if you do forget, certainly we have that within URM. I think ours is 5 minutes, and then it will lock itself, the screen, in that respect. So just double check that that's in place, particularly if you're using your own device. It's not issued by the company. It's just making sure that personal device is in line with company policy. You can also contact the IT department and request that time frame is shortened. So if 5 minutes seems a little long, it can be reduced down to 60 seconds, that sort of stuff. But it's essentially just what's become more common practice in the work environment, in the office environment. It's just continuing that in the remote home environment as well.
Yeah. I know my screen locks after 5 minutes on my work laptop, but best practice is to just, as soon as you're away from that device, just lock it straight away. Amazing. Thank you, Fraser. So tip number three, strong password. Can you tell me about that one?
Yeah, so these ones, the next few tips are more sort of technically related. A lot of it may already be provided as default within the machines, but one of the things that you should focus on is your password strength. Again, most companies will have a policy around passwords, so a certain length, certain type of characters, numbers, special characters like exclamation marks, that kind of thing. There'll be an insistence that it isn't a repeat of the previous password. And there may also be controls around not having the same word used in repetition within the password. So, sort of your first name and then your first name again kind of thing. But if you are using your own device, again, it would be to make sure that the password is set up on that device in line with your company policy. And quite often, if you've got your own tablet or laptop, you might not set up a password because it's yours. You only use it in your own personal environment. But it's just passing on that best practice, from a corporate provided device where there is a need to have it password protected. It's following that best practice on your own personal device, particularly if you're going to be using it for work.
And then number 4, we've got antivirus.
Antivirus. So yeah, again, in the sort of technical field, if you're using your own device, it's to make sure that any antivirus software is up to date. A lot of businesses now will allow companies to use employees to use their own devices, and they'll have things like a bring your own device policy. What that basically is your own device must be aligned to a company device. So there'd be a check that you have a password on there. There'd be a check that you are running anti-software on there, and it is the latest version. So it's applying that practice if it's your own device. If you're using a company device at home, then the antivirus software will be provided as a default, via the IT team and part of the configuration. So they should be applying any updates to that automatically. But again, if you're unsure, it's something you can just check with the IT department. What is the process around that? What is the policy around that? And then they will give you the pointers to set up antivirus software on your own device if that's what you need to do.
So number 5, patching. I know this is a really important one for multiple standards and certifications like Cyber Essentials. Patching is a really key thing. So can you just talk us through that one?
Yeah. So patching, it's the patch management. So devices, they need constant updates. There might be certain issues that have been identified that don't necessarily affect you day to day, but the actual machine itself is not running to its optimum level unless these patches are applied. They might contain security updates, security fixes and things like that. So it's making sure that the device is running, to the latest patching updates. Now, for most of us, it means a Windows update. That's probably what's more familiar to people. Similarly, if you've got your own personal device, like an Android phone or an iPhone, every so often the phone says an update is required to the operating system. It's that kind of approach. It's if you don't do that, the device can become more liable to issues in terms of hacking and viruses and things like that, because it hasn't got its security mechanisms updated. So yeah, it's making sure that your devices, particularly if you're using your own computer from home, that has a patch management program applied. As we say, if it's a company provided device, then that will be something that's already in place and more of an automated process. And we're probably all familiar with the request to update your machine. Do you want to do it now or a later date? That's essentially what the patching is doing. It sort of happens behind the scenes, but occasionally it needs the individual to interact with that. So, but if that doesn't happen, IT departments have the ability to override and push that patch through so that their IT estate is secure. Might not necessarily be the case if it's a personally owned device. So that's why we sort of stress the hint here is to make sure that you've got that program in place. And if it, where it can be, it's aligned to what your company's process is.
No, I know that could be really difficult to stay on top of if you're doing it manually, and you've got to manually go through and update every single program and keep on top of which ones need it and which ones don't. Perfect. Thank you, Frazer. So number 6, router and Wi-Fi. What's this one about?
Okay. So a lot of us will have internet at home, and you have a router that provides the internet, and more it's becoming more common that it's a Wi-Fi internet connection, so there's no cable necessarily needed. Couple of things that we want to sort of stress here is that making sure the router itself is password protected. If you're purchasing one from an internet provider, it will come with a default password. Usually there is an instruction to change that, the first login, so that it's something that you can create that's personal to yourself. And equally, the Wi-Fi connection, there'll be a requirement to password protect that. So you've got separate passwords, which makes it 2 layers of defense, so that it's ensuring that your connection is fully secure. There's also, you may have the ability to encrypt your router. A lot of this will come as default now because the modern routers and Wi-Fi connections have their own encryption built in. But you may have come across, the need to do this yourself. So it's ensuring that's set up. And then when you're looking at your particular router, there's obviously different lights that flash, the power light, whether there's a Wi-Fi connection and things like that. Often it will ask to check that the router is what we call a WPA2 is enabled. And what that actually stands for is the Wi-Fi protected access. And that essentially is the router protecting itself. So once that's enabled, it's another layer of protection. Now, as I say, most modern day routers, that's already, inbuilt as part of a default setting, and we don't necessarily need to worry about it. Sometimes if the connection goes down, you might run a diagnostic, you might have a manual, or you might check with Google, what to do. And one of the things it may check is that your WPA2 light is solid rather than flashing. And if that's the case, then it means that it's running its own protection within the router itself. So just to keep an eye out for that particular setting on your router.
So this next one is quite techy, I believe. So it might be a little bit above the pay grade of certain people. But setting up a virtual network, could you talk me through that one, please?
So if you've got the know-how, then by all means, give it a go. It may be a case of contacting your IT department to get some assistance on this. But you might want to consider setting up a separate network within your router. And what that will enable is the work that you're doing will be protected from any other device that's connected to the router. So most home situations now, there might be several things connected to that particular Wi-Fi router. They may not have as strong a security setting as that's required in order for you to confidently work from home and have that confidentiality, security in that respect. So you can set up a virtual network within the router itself. So it's almost like it's running independently to any other device that's connected to the router. So that's particularly where that comes from. Now it's not common knowledge, how you would do that. It's whether you've got the technical know-how. And as I say, if you reach out to your IT department, they'd be able to give guidance on that if you feel it's something that you need to look at implementing.
Is that something that would be more applicable to people that are working on really sensitive, confidential information?
Yeah. When you're in the work environment in the office, if that's something that's commonly set up already because of the sensitivity of what you're working on, then it would make sense that you want a similar environment at home. So you probably would be already given prompts to set this up. There may be some checks, that need to be put in place prior to you working from home. But that's essentially where it's coming from. It's that sort of inner layer of protection to the activity you're doing via the router, and it's separated from other devices that are connected.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. So number 8, separate network. What's this?
So it's similar to setting up a virtual network, but rather than it being virtually within the same router, you just have separate networks. So it may be that working from home, I have a router, a Wi-Fi connection just for work, and then a second router, a Wi-Fi connection for my daughter's devices to be connected to. If there's a games console, they call it the Internet of Things. So now people control their heating system remotely. So there'll be a Wi-Fi connection there. My printer's got its own Wi-Fi connection. which I can leave separate to my actual internet provider's internet connection. So that gives me a level of security that I'm not necessarily going to have anything untoward coming through my printer that will impact my device whilst I'm working from home. But again, it just depends on the sensitivity or the confidentiality of the work that you're doing, and whether it's a risk that is perceived, and therefore it might be an approach that you want to take to ensure that you don't have that risk, essentially, when you're working from home.
So for number 9, we're staying with the fairly technical, and you've got encryption here. So where does encryption come into this?
So there may be a need to send things, information while you're working from home, an email, it might be a file that needs to be sent, and what you're trying to do is protect or prevent that information from being intercepted once it's in the internet. So one of the things to look at or consider is encrypting that information before you send it. You can create things like zip files, and then the file condenses the information, so it's not sending as much information, but it also can ask you to provide a password for that. And then you pass that password on to the recipient of the information via a different means, maybe a text message or a phone call, and then they can open the information when it's received. So yeah, it's trying to protect the information that you need to send whilst you're working from home, because this kind of encryption is there as standard when you're in the office or the work environment. It's already there within. And one of the things that you might want to look at that is even better, than just encrypting a file when you send it, is looking at the end-to-end encryption. And that can be done by using what's called a VPN, or Mac, in terms of whether you're on a Windows or a Mac device. And VPN stands for virtual private network. So it's similar to what we mentioned before, where you've got a virtual network within your router. What you're essentially doing is any activity on your network is protected via that VPN, and it might require you to log into it separately when you're setting up your device or when you're connecting to the internet. So there may be a secondary set of credentials needed, passwords to get through, and that will encrypt the information as it's being sent and as it's received by the recipient. So the end-to-end encryption, as they call it. So something else to consider, if you are sending sensitive information, from home. So it depends on your role. So it might be if you working in a finance team and you're sending lots of financial information, not a problem when you're in the office because you've got the end-to-end encryption. It might be something worth considering if you're sending that information from home, whether the file's encrypted, whether the person receiving it, has the ability to open that file. So yeah, it's just applying that approach.
So final tip from you, Fraser, we've got number 10, is stay informed. So this feels like a very important one to me. Tell me about that one.
It's staying abreast of what IT are telling you, responding to update requests that come through to your devices. I know they often pop up at the most inconvenient time, middle of a meeting or something. But there is the ability to set those to happen at a later date. They can happen overnight, when it's more convenient. But also just bear in mind the source of the information that you're getting. Just make sure it's from a reputable source. So that might be something that's directly coming from work. It might be information that's coming directly from the provider of the service, or the product that you have. So it's just making sure you're only trusting trustworthy sites, things like government websites or websites that have major branding to them, and just bear in mind that the website itself may not be genuine. So just look at the web address, and if anything looks unusual, just flag it to your IT department. They can easily check whether it is genuine or not. Avoid clicking links, within emails or social media messages, because that could always be a false link that's been set up. Go to the official website first and then check. And you may find, if you're looking at a deal on social media where there's a huge discount on something, you go to the actual website of the product that you're looking at, and there's no mention of the deal, and then that's an indicator that what's on social media isn't necessarily genuine. But it's just important to remember that there is help and support there. Typically your IT department or your compliance department, if you have those teams within your business, and just remember that the old adage, there's no such thing as a stupid question when it comes to this. If it doesn't look right, then it probably isn't, and just flag and get a second opinion. So the last thing you want to do is click on a link and it to cause damage to your own system and network, and that may then filter through to the work environment. So yeah, just double check and ask if you're unsure.
Thank you for your time today, Frazer. And for everyone that wants to read up on this a little bit more, we've got a blog on our website called 10 Top Tips for Maintaining Information and Cybersecurity When Home Working. So do go and check that out. And thank you for listening today. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.